The folks in your corner at the most pivotal points of your life, they matter. And if you have people in your life that are pushing you forward, thank God for them all. Stay tuned for more. I'm Ashley White, the host of Joy on the Journey podcast, a weekly podcast all about defining, finding, and maintaining joy on the journey of life. Y'all, every week I get the privilege of talking with women that have either made a direct impact on my life or making the world a better place. And this week, I'm going to do my best not to cry. If I had just kept talking, I would have been fine. This week is super, super special and personal to me. As many of you all know, this podcast came about as a tribute to my beloved grandmother. And one of the last voices that she heard was Reverend Janella Pyles singing Blessed Assurance. I have shared with her privately, and I take it a privilege to say publicly, thank you. Thank you so much for showing up in that moment, for comforting my mother and I, and just your presence made everything better.
To God be the glory.
And I know, I just want to say thank you.
Absolutely.
And y'all, what is so super special about this is my story isn't unique. Reverend Janella has shown up for countless families in the same impactful way. And this is her desire to serve the Lord and to serve the Lord's people. So to get a chance to share a portion of her journey, I count it a privilege. So Reverend Janella, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
She got a whole bunch more accolades that I wrote down, but y'all, we gonna get there, okay? So Reverend Janella, we start every podcast by asking guests to give their definition of joy.
So I am thankful. Thank you for this opportunity. When you ask that question, I always have to think in terms of how I experience it, rather than a formal definition. And so for me, joy is really that calm assurance that God will be with me, that He's present with me. And I know it sounds super spiritual, instead of just like, well, it's when I feel good. But really what it is for me is we can rage on the inside and present a calm presence. But when my inside matches my exterior with calmness, that is really when I find my greatest joy. That I can that means I'm really relying on God in whatever circumstance. So no matter what the circumstance is, we should still count it all joy, still experience joy. It's not easy. It's not always. And so that is really that space for me that means joy.
How have you found when whether it's nerves, anxiety, or whatever, that inside is like, it's a lot happening. What is your go-to to calm and bring everything into kind of alignment?
Yeah, I think for me, breathing is a huge part. I'll stop and just say, let me take a deep breath. Sometimes it's walking away from whatever, if it's an external circumstance that's causing that internal strife. I will typically stop talking and just kind of go into that space of, okay, we pull it together. Music will do it for me. So jazz is probably gospel and jazz are my favorites, but jazz is the thing that really calms my spirit. Just calms me. So listening to quiet music, and even sounds. So I subscribe to one of those rain channels or something.
Oh.
So I'll stop and listen to the rain. Just looking at nature helps. When I just go outside, not in Houston heat, but when I go outside or look outside at just life, trees, plants, all of that is kind of centering for me. So when things are feeling abnormal on the inside, that's really where I turn. Like, okay, is there something visually that I can do? Do I need to take a breath? Is it a combination of those things? Is it walking away? Is it, and prayer obviously is in the midst of all of that, but it really is just, there's some external things practical things that I would like to do to kind of help bring me back into focus.
Yeah, I love that. I'm similarly, I love water.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime I can hear waves or put my feet in water, it's something about, it's so serene for me. And so we're blessed that Galveston it is up the street, and it's a great service when you can't get away to Jamaica or Mexico or wherever else. Thank you for Galveston. I appreciate it.
And I think part of that comes from, God. This is God's creation, so He uses it as another means of helping us center. It's not a lack of focus on God. It's actually a turning to God when we look at nature. So
yeah, absolutely. So I want to dig deeper into Reverend Janella's story, but before we get there, have you subscribed to the channel? For those that are watching, did you know that the podcast is also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify? So do me a favor, subscribe, like, share, comment, do all the things. Thank you so much. So Reverend Janella, through my research, because y'all know by now I stalk all my guests, I understand that you accepted your call to ministry in 2013. But I want to go back to when Reverend Janella was just baby Janella. Did you have a natural, like, I'm going to do something in ministry when I grow up?
So the answer to that in some respects is yes.
Okay.
So I have always sensed something. My parents would have said, something's different. I remember being about 7 years old, and my mother got me this children's Bible storybook. And my favorite story in the Bible book is just odd to me as an adult looking back on it, was Solomon, where he had to make the decision whether to cut the baby in half. I'm like, why is that? First of all, why is that in a children's book? That's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. But I remember asking God, and I laid on the floor and I kept asking God, I want to be wise like Solomon. I just want to be wise like Solomon. And that is a memory that has stayed with me all these years. My mother and father always had me very active in the church. And God laid on my heart probably in my early 20s that I wanted, that I needed to give Him the best years of my life, not what was left. Those were the words that God gave me. And so my saying used to always be, I want to give God the best years of my life, not what's left. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't do all kinds of stuff, but I still wanted to give God the best years of my life. And so I asked the Lord, what does that look like? So my journey in ministry actually began back then. I was working in corporate America. I started after graduating college and all of that. Worked in corporate, and I knew that the Lord was calling me into ministry, but I didn't know what that meant. I did not sense a call to preaching ministry. My gifting was really administration, leadership, teaching. I started discovering those gifts over time. And I remember, I was at work. I had a review with my manager. I was working for the eye care insurance company, VSP. And my boss asked me, she said, Janella, my ranking was very high in the company. I ranked in like the top 1% of the company or something. And they were like, management has taken notice. We want to help you get wherever you want to go in the organization. And the Lord had already told me I was going into ministry. And I remember telling my boss, I said, I know God is calling me to ministry. And she looked at me like, what?
Right, well, that's not what we're talking about.
This is your review. I'm like, yeah. And I think because I was a person that did not like to disappoint. As a child, I didn't like to disappoint. Didn't like to disappoint people. You have to grow and learn how to manage that. But I didn't want to be put in a position of, this upward trajectory and then have to be like, no, I got to follow what God says. And he says it's time to go. So I wasn't sure how to do all that. She said, well, just let us know because we want to help you. And I asked the Lord, I'm like, well, what do you want me to do with this? And the Lord, I could hear the Lord clearly tell me the assignment will come. So I just kept doing what I was doing. I did my job, enjoyed my job. And I ended up serving I was the young adult representative on the search committee for our new pastor at my home church. And working in that, that's a whole nother story, whole nother time, whole nother testimony. But a year after just after he started, maybe about 6 months after he started, I get a call and he says, I want you to come be my administrator. And I was like, okay. And he said, no, I need you to pray about it. I said, no, the Lord already told me that I was going to be in ministry. I've just been waiting for the assignment. And he said, well, no, I still want you to pray about it. And I said, okay. So we prayed about it. And about a week later, he called me in and asked me, he's like, we can't pay you what you'll make in what you're making in corporate America. So, I said, well, he asked me to write down a number, like a salary amount. And the Lord gave me a number. I put the number down on a sticky and he put a number down on a sticky and we handed it to each other and they were the same number. So I said, okay. And so we prayed and then fast forward, I ended up taking the role. I served as a church administrator, executive administrator, his assistant, and the church administrator for about 4 years.
Really?
So I did that. And the story with all of that was, there's so much. I mean, there's so much to say. But that was really my accepting my call into ministry originally. So that was back in about 2001, 2000. And so one thing I always say to people is that when you're looking at calls to ministry, it's not only the preaching ministry, it is that God can call you and place you right where he wants you to be. So I accepted my call formally in ministry in the preaching ministry in 2013.
Wow. So I want to go back to, you had so many great points. I wanted to go back. You said that after in the meeting with your previous supervisor, you felt God had said, you ain't gonna be around here long, but God hadn't revealed what that next place was. Correct. That he had revealed the assignment will come. How did you stay still, knowing where you were wasn't where you were going to be long, but where you were going hadn't been revealed? How did you stay or did you stay?
I did. Okay. I sat until so my dad used to say this thing about me. He said, you don't move until God tells you to. And I never noticed it about myself, but until I was clear, like this is what I'm supposed to do, I would not move. There's been times where I've made a decision because I've made decisions before where I moved too soon, and I knew as soon as I did it, that was the wrong decision. So because I bumped my head enough on those past decisions, I know not to move until God says to move. And so that part, I stayed in that role because I loved my job. I loved what I was doing at VSP. And I loved the people that I worked with. So doing the work, it was frustrating from the standpoint of like, well, is this all? Am I supposed to do something else? But it was like, keep doing what you're doing until the Lord says go. And when He said go, then I was ready.
That's such a powerful lesson for so many. Me, I done told y'all before. Y'all get to see these, but this is really just for me. Because so often your prayers and your present state is like, oh Lord, but okay, oh but Lord, I just and surrendering to what the Lord has said and resisting the urge to go too soon.
Too soon, yes. And the way He does it for each of us can be different. There's ways in which God speaks to me that I've had to learn over time. I believe that God uses the Bible talks. You can see patterns of things in the Bible, right? So I look for the patterns in how God has spoken to me in the past, because that's the thing that gets my attention. What gets your attention, what gets my attention, can be different. And so there were things that I knew to just kind of be looking for. I don't think in any situation have I ever applied for an assignment that God has given me. So like even a job, I had one where the Spirit told me to apply, and I applied for that thing and I got that thing. But I've not really, my pastor calling me and asking me about that role. The next assignment, any assignment that I've actually put myself into and got myself into trouble, they were ones I pursued.
Yeah.
That's the way
I can honestly say that is my testimony as well. The things that I have sought after, the things I'm like, no, but Lord, yes, this thing, this person, those are the things where God was like, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It'd be a whole lot better if you just waited.
Yeah.
And the older I get, I am praying to trust what I know, as difficult as it still is, to trust what I know is real, that the Lord has opened doors that I didn't even know to knock on.
Yes.
And to resist the temptation to push something for my own agenda or something that's going to highlight me and not Him.
That's correct.
So, growing up in California, and one of the things we share is Reverend Janella is also an only child. I'm an only child. My mother is an only child. So parents become, that's it. It's just you and them. How did watching their faith encourage your own faith journey?
My parents, one of the things I greatly appreciate, and please know, my parents were my best friends. So both of them for different reasons. My mother was more of the structured, I don't want to say she was the disciplinarian. They both did, equal, probably shared in that responsibility. My dad was more the gentle nurturer, which is, odd. I used to tell my dad, I'm like, you're the girl in the family, you're the, and he would laugh at it. But both of them demonstrated faith uniquely in their own ways. So my father was one, he like I said, he was a very gentle soul. One of the things I found interesting with my dad was I don't think he appreciated his gifts as much as the rest of the world appreciated them. So he was that nurturer and just, I don't know, just a gentle soul. Young people loved him, because he was always an encourager. And sometimes I think he wanted to, like sometimes you see another gift and you're like, I want to do that. And not that he wasn't good at what he did, but it was just more that I wanted him to appreciate that about him. So the thing I learned with him is how to treat other people lovingly. I am a very structured, disciplined person like my mother. And my mother never mistreated people, but she was pretty like straightforward. My dad was the one looking for like the gentle ways to do certain things. They were very, the other thing that I really loved is my mother had this thing where you work at it and you work at it in excellence. You give your best to the church, you give your best to God. My father, same thing, strong work ethic. But I think the way that he demonstrated certain aspects was like, I'll give you an example. Every Sunday morning, 6 a.m., the record player would come on and gospel music just blared throughout the house. Now, during the week, we heard gospel because my dad was a choir director.
Really?
And so, I sang in the choir, and, my mother sang in the choir. So we always had music going. But every Sunday morning at 6 a.m., that record player would, just the discipline of doing that was like on Sunday mornings now. If I don't do that, I'm like, oh my gosh, where's the music? I still have to play that. Learning how to work with other people, watching my parents be hurt in certain situations and still go and want to serve and still help people. So those were things that they kind of nurtured in me, and just being involved. I was always involved in church. My mother was like, you got to be involved in something. So I was in the children's choir, and I was like, I don't like it, Mommy. They holler. The director hollered at us. I was like, I don't like all that hollering. And so she's like, well, you got to do something. So I was an usher. And I ushered from 7 years old, 7 or 8, all the way up until I was maybe early 30. So, yeah. So I've just always been active like that in the ministry. And so I think, but it stems from, my mother was they both loved to study the Bible. My mother disciplined. 6:30 in the morning, she was studying her Bible. I could watch her go. She'd go for a walk, do her exercise, 30 minutes. Then she would go and sit with her Bible, and then she would start her day. So just that kind of structure was really, pivotal in my development.
Wow, that's incredible. And to know that so many of the lessons that they were just living have been so impactful that you have continued. So I want to ask, how difficult then was it? Well, I have two questions. One, do you think it would surprise anyone that knew young Janella to see you now?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So most of my friends, family members that have known me my whole life, they're like, it's no surprise. To me, it is. I mean, there's more things to me that's a surprise than like my extended family. They're like, yeah, no, that's not a surprise. They used to call me an evangelist in like high school. Like, oh, well, evangelist. I was like, what? I'm like, no, I'm just a kid. But they're like, no,
you're
something's
not.
different.
You're different. The second question is, how difficult then was it to leave California? Because I think, for so many people that may be watching, they're on a crust of, God is leading me different from my home.
Yeah.
God, I know it's you, but I'm comfortable right where I am.
Yeah. So that piece of my journey is, I often tell people not to be prescriptive. So when I say this, I'm not saying that this is the way anybody else should do anything. But there was a lot going on in my life, in my church, and I was a significant part of that church. That when I left, it was very difficult. But about 6 months before, so this was in like 2003, I started getting extremely restless. And I couldn't figure out what it was. Like, I was like, what is going on? And my pastor, who I was serving at the time, he called me in one day. He's like, what's going on? I was like, I don't know. And I said, I just feel anxious, or like, I couldn't figure out what it was. My dad also asked me about it. He called me one day, we were talking. He came down to my house, and he said, well, what's been going on with you? And I was like, I don't know. I was kind of short with people. I just was trying to, I'm like, let me just focus on this, work. And I just wasn't myself. I don't know how to describe it. I just wasn't myself. And my pastor said, Janella, when the Lord speaks, be listening. And I was like, what? And I just kept asking the Lord every night, like, okay, what is it that you need for me to do? Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. That went on for 6 months. In January of that next year, 2004, I'd been still asking the same question, God, what am I supposed to do? And it was the first week of January. I don't know the exact dates or whatever, but for 4 nights, my eyes would pop open at 2 a.m. And I remembered what my pastor said. Now, I'm a very obedient child. So when someone tells me if my pastor said something or whatever, I was like, so I woke up every night and I would say, speak, Lord, your servant's listening.
Cool.
And every night I heard, it's time to go. And every night I would give excuses like, okay, but I'm doing this and I'm involved in this and I'm doing this. And, every night. What about parents? What about, what about the church? What about pastor? What about this? It's time to go. Next night, I made the next excuses. Finally, on the 4th night, I said, okay, Lord, I'll go wherever you tell me to go. I'll do what you tell me to do. Where am I going? Nothing. I was like, what?
Okay, God, I'm here now.
I've made it to this point. So, and it wasn't until a week later, I just settled in my heart. I was like, okay, he's going to tell me where to go at some point. So I started looking for stuff, of course. I'm like, well, let me look in cities that
Let me help you.
Let me look in cities I've been wanting to go to. That's what I did. I was like, I wanted to go here. I wanted to go here. Nothing would come up. And people laugh at this, but it's really true. I was a web developer and I did online communications when I worked for VSP. And so I knew how to design websites. I could do all of that. My searches, when I would look for things that God had not told me to, would come up blank. And I was like, how is a search coming up blank? City information, nothing. It would just be blank. I was like, that's weird. So
what's that? Let me block this child.
Yeah, it was like, okay. And so a couple called. This woman called. Her name is Mary Bibb. She lives here in Tomball. And she was a member of my home church in California. And she said, and hi, Mary, if you see this.
Hi,
she said to me, oh, Janella, remember the tithing information you used to run in the bulletin for the church? I was like, yeah. She said, I need you to send that to me. We need it for our church here. They had relocated to Houston. I said, okay, I'll send it over to you. And she said, and I want you to come here. You need to move here to Houston because I'm going to find you a husband. And I was like, Mary. I said, first of all, I've been to Houston twice, didn't like it, would never live there. And she was like,
hard never.
Hard never. And she said, no, Janella. She said, I just consider. I said, Mary, I am not coming to Houston. I said, no way. And she said, but girl, there's all this stuff here. She worked for a organization. And so she's like, there's some nice brothers here and I'm going to find you a husband. I said, Mary, I am not coming to Houston. I will not do it. And she said, okay, well, just send me the information. So I went to, it took me about 2 weeks. I'm still doing searches for other cities. And the Spirit says,
hello,
it's Houston. I was like, I'm not going to Houston. Sure enough, I was like, okay, Lord, let me be open. I asked the Lord, help me to be open to whatever he's saying. And I bought a plane ticket to come and visit Mary. Not for a husband, but for the city, right? And so I bought a plane ticket, came out and toured the city. And I was, at that point in my life, I was just like, no, you have to be open. I'd been here before. I was just like, no, it's a big city. I don't like big cities. I want to live in someplace smaller, you know. And the Lord's like, it's Houston. And so I think within, that was January. February, I came to visit Mary and her husband. His name was Reverend William Bibb, or is Reverend William Bibb. Came to visit them and stayed at their house. They still called this one room in their house Janella's room. And I drove the city, and I just got to know the city. I went to a church that I knew about. The pastor of the church I was serving in California, his nephew is a pastor here.
Okay.
And so I went and visited, and I think March or April that year, I had another plane ticket to come back. I sold my house, and I was here me and my parents drove out May 14th and moved me here. Mm-hmm.
So many nuggets in that story of obedience, even reluctant obedience. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a journey. I mean, there's so much even packed in there that my, and this is the way for me, that I knew it was the Lord, that all the things fell right into place leading up to that. So I had made in my mind, I'm moving in September. That gives me time to, get stuff. The Lord's like, no, you need to move that up. But I was like, and my mother called me, or my mother and father called me, and they said, hey, let's go to breakfast. We go to breakfast. She said, hey, I'm off work this week. That's a good time since you're going to move. That's the time I can help you. We can help you go. I was like, oh, okay. I guess that'll be the week.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
since
really
you're leaving. This is the
week that we can help you. So.
Or you can do it yourself. But I think you would like us to go.
This is the week we can help you go. I was like, okay. So that became the week. My house that I had, I sold it. It sold in 2 days, and the gentleman needed to move into it the day I needed to move out of it. So I needed to leave on the 14th to accommodate my mother's schedule, and we closed on the 14th. It was just little things that the Lord just made happen that was like, okay.
Yeah, that's something that I just love about the Lord, that he knows his children and he knows the things that are going to hang us up.
Yeah.
And if this one thing didn't work, well, then there goes the whole plan.
Like, I can't
move,
do any of it.
I can't do nothing. He goes out of his way because of his beautiful and powerful love for us. I got you. Because I already know, I already know you.
You're going to be trouble.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
let me just make this path smooth.
Yep.
And help you with this transition. Wow, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Y'all, time almost getting away from me, so I have to ask these final couple questions. A large part of your ministry at church is working with people through 2 huge transitions. One, joining the church and or accepting Christ, and then comforting bereaving families. But you have such a peaceful nature. Do you believe that God also designed you in such a way to be able to meet the needs of these specific people?
Yeah, I think the answer to that, I do believe is a yes. I did not ever expect to go into care ministry in particular. My I guess what I've always deemed that was my area. My gifting is really about equipping. So I believe that God has called me to equip people. So when Pastor Cosby and Reverend Johnson, Dr. Johnson now, reached out about this particular role, my first response was like, you want me to do the funerals at the church? Because that was, education, development, those are really, so the new member side, I understand. But the care side, I was like, well, I love people, I care for people, but you want me to do the funerals? And so I prayed about that. I was like, okay, let me ask the Lord about that. But there was another story tied to it that made the answer to it a yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew it was what I was supposed to do, but I was like, can I check with the Lord one more time before I say yes? And what really happened, though, was that really prepared me for dealing with that time in people's lives for care was the loss of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming into this role, I started like on at the 1st of November, almost 5 years ago now. And my mother and father came to visit me, and both became very ill here. And my dad died here, and then my mother passed away about 4 months later. And I know that God allowed me to go through that,
Mm.
not only for me, because it did give me insight into how to nurture, be empathetic to, care for people going through something I'd just gone through, but also for our congregation. The thing that God really blessed me to see was that the members of our congregation really embraced me so kindly,
Mm.
and allowed me to see that, that I think it helped when I go to meet with them today.
Mm-hmm.
They're always like, no, we know you know. So it's not I don't have to convince them that I understand loss. Our losses are different. Our
Mm-hmm.
losses are very unique to each one of us.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to convince them that I understand loss. And so that the things that I'm trying to do to help them really do help them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what God did was use my gifts in administration and all those things. I didn't think that would be that useful in this role. But what I found is families need structure,
Yeah.
order when things are so chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
It is a blessing to them that somebody's there to say, hey, these are the next things we need to do. Hey, let's do this. I need you to, let's take care of this. Let's help them just kind of navigate this phase, this
Mm-hmm.
space, while they make transitions in their life after the loss of a loved one.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I cannot. The system was both, it worked for me because I, like your mother, am very much like my grandmother, very much, what is it that you need and when do you need it? Oh, great, there's a template, even better.
Yes.
So it just makes things systemized when your brain is just
All over.
bouncing from every which way. Um, my secondary question to that is, while every loss is different, I can only imagine, though, every loss does trigger an element of personal grief.
Mm-hmm.
How do you minister to yourself in those moments?
So it's interesting. I have had to ask God about that because when I see individuals that have lost loved ones, um, it it actually brings me joy to help them. Um, it is almost of comfort to me to be able to walk with somebody through it.
Wow.
So it's not burdensome at all. Like I don't understand why it's not, because there's days where I'm like, this I should be laid out someplace, but I don't feel that way. I feel like um, it does bring me joy to be able to help them through that same thing. Now, they'll rage, be upset. Sometimes we can't do things the way that people may want. What I've found is that God gave me one of the old jobs I've had was troubleshooting. So when you do
Mm-hmm.
system design and all that, you troubleshoot. I'm always thinking of what solution do I have that meets what they're asking, even if I can't do it the way they want it. And once I come up with a solution, they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, we could do that." So it's just that part is just it really is joy to me. Now there are days when I'm exhausted. We are like right now we're in a season where
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of losses going on in our church. So I'll find when I'm really really tired, um, I'll go hit the spa make my appointment. I did that last week. I woke up Monday morning. Mondays are my day off, and I try to honor and hold those pretty sacred. But I woke up that morning and I just was like, okay, let me call somebody.
Are you yes, I'll be there. What
Yes,
time?
what time?
It doesn't matter.
What time? And
I
I
will
make
be
it a
there.
day. I mean, I'll spend several hours doing that. But yeah, that's really my space. Every once in a while, I do have a grief counselor that I went to when I lost my parents, and so I talk to her. Usually, I talk to her maybe once, twice a year.
Okay.
And then I have a more. She's a clinical psychologist that I see pretty regularly. Maybe 3 or 4 5 times a year or so. And that's more just to kind of like, am I stable? Am I doing okay?
Am I missing something?
Am I missing something? And just to kind of get thoughts out of my head. So I do that as well.
And this actually we just kind of covered it. My last question was about, because I knew she does a lot of self-care tips. But no, we just talked about being able to get away and separate, even if it's taking a weekend to be alone, to turn in your phone if you can.
Yes.
And be still.
Yes. And that's been one of the bigger challenges is I'm tied to my phone because of the work. But being able to set it aside is really turning off notifications unless it's like an urgent. So I'm trying to figure out learning how to set my notifications for, like, there's certain ones that when they come in, I need to hear it.
Yeah.
But all the rest of them, I'm just like, okay, let's kind of put those aside. But yeah, I think that's one of those areas that I still have to improve upon.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I know how busy and pulled she is, and so I'm so grateful that she's granted us this hour of time. So I'm really super excited about the final segment, which is your journey ahead. So as you are praying and seeking God for direction and guidance, would you dare share your hope for where you see yourself in your journey in 5 years?
So I don't know yet.
Okay.
So I have been asking God that very thing. I've been coming up out of the job that I'm in, just requires a lot of my time and energy. And I think I'm finally coming up out of the space of really dealing with my own grief from the loss of my parents. I think what was challenging with losing my mom and dad in the time that I did was it was the start of the pandemic, or just before. My dad died just before the pandemic. My mother died right at the top of the pandemic. And I think what that did is delayed my own grief because you're still trying to navigate so much just in the pandemic and loss and all of that. So I really had stopped dreaming for myself. And so finally, I'm starting to come out of that fog of, like, didn't feel like there was no future, just felt like trying to imagine a future of things that, okay, where would God have me go? What would he have me do? I just hadn't gotten to that place. So I'm finally starting to get there. I think the biggest thing for me now is just working on more balance for myself, finishing my dissertation. It's a whole nother thing. Yeah, I think those are the two big areas for me. So I maybe at the end of this year I'll have an answer to that question.
Okay, we'll take it. Especially if that means she has to come back. Reverend Janella, I am so grateful for your time here, for your you. I'm just grateful for you and everything that you bring.
You as well.
Thank you. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, if they're like, man, is she always that peaceful? She is always this peaceful, and the voice but y'all also got to hear her preach. I will put some links in the descriptions of times where she has blessed Willow Avenue Baptist Church. She's a powerful, powerful preacher, has a beautiful voice as well. Y'all, she's a treasure to the kingdom. How can someone, if they wanted to get in touch with you?
Best ways is usually via email, and you want me to share it?
No, I can put it in the description.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then primarily at the church, Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church.
Find her there. She's there
all the time.
Literally all the time. But thank you so much. Y'all, this has been incredible. Absolutely incredible. I'm so grateful. Please like, share, comment. What was your favorite takeaway? When were moments where God challenged you to obey? And what was the result of your obedience? Let us know in the comments. But until we gather again every single Thursday, may God increase your joy, grant you strength for the journey, and give you the courage to tell your story. Bye, friends.